Good morning, Pat. How are you?
Morning, sir.
Welcome back.
Actually, it's been a long time. I think I've ever been before you, sir,
Yeah.
in this capacity.
Right. You've been before the committee, right?
2005,
Wow.
long time ago.
Couple things. I'm telling everyone that I'm going to call shortly after business hours only those applicants that we put on the short list. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to come up and whisper to me outside the camera your cell phone number. We've all read your application. Thank you for applying. We're short on time in terms of each interview. So if you could give an opening statement, maybe a few minutes, tell us something about yourself that maybe we won't glean from the application. So initially, you can come up real quick with that and come in and whisper to me.
Oh, you want it right now?
Yeah, right now. Don't forget. Pat, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to be here today. My name is Patrick Lepore, for those of you who have never met me before. I've been a lifelong Florida resident. I'll be 55 this May. I've spent the last 29 years here in Brevard County, latter half of my life practicing law. And I can tell you that I was raised in Miami, Florida, in a very strict Italian Catholic upbringing. My father, Emilio, was truly a member of what Dan Rather has referred to as the greatest generation. He volunteered for the Navy, the outbreak of World War II. He went to the University of Miami following the war on the GI Bill, and he became a high school public teacher for his career following the war. My father raised me to believe that a life of service, whether it was going to be to God, your country, or to your fellow man, was not just a cliche, it was your Catholic duty. And for me, the call was the law. Priesthood, you can't raise your own family. I always wanted to have my own family. I'll never forget, if you don't mind a little story, my first semester of law school, I was at a function for first semester law students, and a young lady came up to me and we struck up a conversation. She says, "Well, Patrick, what made you decide to become a lawyer?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to help the poor and disenfranchised." And she laughed in my face. I said, "That's a good one." She was joking. She thought I was joking. I couldn't have been more serious. Now the conversation, more often than not, when I'm at a social function, turns to, how do you do what you do? How do you represent people that you know are guilty? And my answer to that is always the same. When I can look at a case, and I know that a young prosecutor like Mr. Pickett used to be, can prove his case beyond a reasonable doubt based on the evidence that I've seen and the witnesses I've spoken to and the depositions that I've done, for me the job is easy. It's to represent that person to the fullest, make sure their constitutional rights are observed, guide them through the system, hopefully negotiate a sentence that is fair, and if not fair, if they choose to go to trial, then so be it. But truly, ladies and gentlemen, the people I lose sleep over are the ones where I look at the case and I say, wait a minute, I think this person's been way overcharged here. Or, believe it or not, this person is innocent. Those are the people I lose sleep over.
Pat, let me stop you there.
Yes, sir.
We have time. Phil.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
If you were selected for this position, what is the thing that you would like to do to improve the way things are handled in court?
Well, I can tell you from my own experience, sir, I believe the courtrooms can be run much more efficiently. I think there are judges who run their courtrooms more efficiently than others. I think that it's important for the judges to take a little more initiative in running their cases rather than just relying on the lawyers. I would cite Judge Dugan. Recently did a tenure before Judge Dugan, and he actively participates in trying to bring the parties together rather than letting the cases drag on and on and on. He kind of forces the parties to come together and make a decision quicker rather than later. I think the judges need to take more responsibilities in their courtrooms with the litigants and with the lawyers.
Thank you. Dan?
So after you escaped from Allen Land in PA,
I learned a lot from that gentleman. I did.
well, one of the things that I've noticed about your application compared to some others is a balance between private practice and public service practice. What sort of, how does that experience contribute to your possible role as a judge?
Well, I had spent 5 years with the prosecutor's office, and I felt it was important to get out there and get another side of it. It was a difficult decision for me to make because I enjoyed prosecuting. I think I was a darn good prosecutor, but I felt it was also important to become a little more rounded, learn a little bit more what it was like out there in the private practice. I believe I put in about 5 years in various aspects. I had my own firm for several years. I worked for a PI firm for about a year, picked up a little bit from there as well. But I honestly felt like my true calling was the courtroom. And in all candor, I'll also tell the committee, after about 5 years in private practice, I went through a divorce and went through a bit of a tough time personally. And it was just kind of a fortuitous situation that a friend of mine was a supervisor at the public defender's office, and they were bleeding lawyers at the time. And he asked me if I'd come work for him, and thought of getting back in the courtroom, which is really what I wanted to do. Working for Mr. Landman. Unfortunately, when you work for him, people pay him a lot of money, and they expect to see his face in the courtroom rather than yours. There was only so much I could do for Mr. Landman. And I wanted to get back in there and try some cases again. And the thought of not having to run a business, or the thought of not having to worry about someone else's bottom line and just focus on the law made the right sense to me at that time. And I'm back with the public defender's office. I love it. It's a challenge. I would tell you that as a former prosecutor, I believe I can say that I believe, contrary to public opinion, that the odds are against the accused in our courtrooms. But I enjoy overcoming the odds much more than relying on them.
Andrew?
Good morning, Pat.
How are you, sir?
Good.
Good to see you again.
We've known each other for a while. We're in the same courtroom, and I know that you have some significant experience in trying cases. Looking at your application, I think that out of all the applicants, you've tried more jury trials, 140 plus.
That's a guess. I gave up counting a long time ago.
So having tried a lot of jury trials, you've appeared in front of a bunch of judges. You know that judges have to make tough decisions that don't always please everybody. Describe a time that you have taken a controversial position that angered or offended people, and how you handled that.
Angered or offended people? Well, I can tell you as a public defender, we tend to anger people a lot, all the time. I tried a second-degree murder trial several years ago where a gentleman shot and killed another human being. I mean, there's no more controversial subject than a homicide. But I truly believed in the man's innocence. I truly believed under the stand your ground law that he had a right to use his legally carried firearm at the time and meet deadly force with deadly force. Trying to convince the prosecution otherwise, I ran into brick walls, and we did what you do in that situation. You take it to a jury, and you let 6 persons from the community decide whether that person had a right to use his firearm, and they did. acquitted. That was a case I lost a heck of a lot of sleep over.
Don?
Good morning, it's nice to meet you.
Hi.
You last applied in 2005.
Yes, ma'am.
Why haven't you applied since that time, and why are you now making the decision to apply for this position?
I thought I was going to be asked that question. So I'm ready for it. I can tell you, family. I put my family first those 13 years. As I said earlier, I went through a divorce. Several years later, I had to institute my own paternity action so that I could secure not only the biological rights, which I knew, but the legal rights to my 6-year-old. So I spent the last 13 years putting my boys first. I have 3 beautiful boys. And that's all behind me now. And as they say, timing is everything. It's the right time. I'm ready to do this again, and here I am.
David?
So you obviously have an exceptional amount of criminal experience on both sides. Wonderful. And you have lots of insights from your experience there. But obviously there's different positions you could be in.
Sure.
Can you tell us about your civil experience and how your civil experience or lack of civil experience would be addressed if you had a civil or family position?
Well, as I said, I did 2 years with a prominent family law firm here. I picked up a lot there. I can also tell you that handling your own divorce, which is what I did, I represented myself. I learned divorce the hard way. Thankfully, my divorce was amicably resolved, but also handled my own paternity action. So learning it from the litigant's perspective in a family law court, I would submit would give me a perspective that perhaps a lawyer who's never been through the process may not have. I mean, as a judge, you're there to judge the litigants, not the lawyers. But I would also hope that, in my opinion, my humble opinion, you're better judges, you're great judges. It's the intangibles that really count. Someone who's fair, obviously, even-tempered. Someone who works hard. And somebody who's willing to dedicate themselves to the job and to service to others. Those, I can tell you without question, I possess those abilities, sir.
Captain?
Thank you. If you were selected for this position, are you prepared to run a campaign?
Sir.
If you were selected, are you prepared to run a campaign?
Well, I think that goes with submitting the application. I've spoken to many people, many of the other people who have been before you, and friends and colleagues. The conversation comes up all the time. Who wants to run for judge? Who wants to put in for judge? And I remember recently talking to someone and saying, well, if you put in for a judgeship, you've also got to be prepared to run for judge. I ran for county court judge in 2005. At that time, I was married. We financed the campaign primarily ourselves. I understand this is a circuit court position. And I will honestly answer your question. It is mind-boggling, sir, considering the prospect of perhaps having to run a campaign. When I look at the money that is being spent now, and largely being spent by the individual candidates, it is somewhat daunting. It truly is. Even a county court race now, people are spending 6 figures, which just boggles my mind.
I have one more quick question.
Yes, sir.
What do you think about the sentencing guidelines?
Yes, sir.
The sentencing guidelines? What do you think about the sentencing guidelines?
The citizen guidelines.
Sentencing.
Sentencing guidelines. You really want my opinion?
I really do.
If we're going to have sentencing guidelines, then let's make them guidelines. Why have guidelines if they don't really apply? I was a fan of the guidelines. I think it brings parity to sentencing. You shouldn't be able to go before one judge on a given charge and perhaps have a similar background to someone before another judge with the same charge. You should be able to rely on the system that you will receive a sentence that is in parity to what your counterpart would receive. That's called fairness.
Let me stop you there.
Yes, sir.
Jeff?
Hi.
How are you, sir?
Very briefly, you made a comment earlier about leaving the private practice, the business, and to go with the public defender. I sort of bookmarked that because if you become a judge, you are going to be running a business, per se, running a courtroom. I'm very close to some judges in Orange County, and it is like running a business. My question is, have you thought about that and how you would, in a couple of just brief comments, how you would run your business in the courtroom?
Well, you know, even the public defender's office is a business. I mean, we have people in our office who do budgets, pay bills. I don't think judges actually do that.
Well, they have organization within their own dockets and moving cases along, having meetings with other judges to ensure that cases are being distributed properly and the like. So,
Well, I'll tell you what, at that first meeting, I'm going to tell them we need to scrap the current way that they are assigning alphabetically the defendants in the courtrooms, because it is just chaos the way it's being done right now. And to get back to the other question regarding parity, somebody with the last name M who gets in trouble is always going to be before the same judge. And that's not fair, okay? Because it's supposed to be random. If I get charged with an offense, my last name should not dictate which judge I come before. It should be random. Every judge should be A to Z. Every judge should be A to Z. And it should be at random by the clerk's office. So that's the first thing I would do at the first business meeting.
Thank you. Andy?
Yes, sir. In response to question 50, in talking about your attributes that you bring to judicial office, you said divorcee, single parent, sole caregiver, school of life. What do you mean by that?
Well, I'll just get right to what you just spoke of, sir. Right now, I am the sole caregiver to a 6-year-old. I get him up every morning. I drop him off at school at 6:30 a.m. I get to work by 7, which gives me a little more leeway to leave early so that I can pick him up somewhere between 4 and 6, get him home, help him with his homework, feed him his dinner, get him to bed, and I'm in bed right behind him at about 8:30. That's my day, Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. That takes a lot of dedication, and it takes a lot of planning and giving up a lot. I am an avid surfer. I'll be honest with you, that's what brought me to this county, not practicing law, but when I got my first offer to practice here, I was elated. I enjoy being in the ocean. I have surfed since I was in high school. I haven't surfed in the last 2 years. I pretty much put it aside to take care of my son. Hopefully, once he's old enough where he can join me in the water, or I'm comfortable enough leaving him alone, I'll be able to get back in. But for now, I work out or do yoga during my lunch hours when the job allows.
Pat, are you still board certified?
I am, sir.
Okay, congratulations on that.
I was getting to that in my opening statement.
Well, I got you there. I think you're one of the few applicants who is in fact board certified, and I commend that to very difficult task. I vetted you with some of your references. I would say, and tell the committee that you were very well thought of on the judges that you appeared before. I think a lot of you.
Thank you.
And my one question to you, since you appear to be one of those guys that's honest and candid, even though you're on camera here, is
Come on.
what judge would you not emulate?
Sorry?
What judge would you not emulate? What circuit court judge would you not emulate in your courtroom if you were a judge?
That's a tough question, Mr. Mayor.
And the answer is?
I've been before some good ones. May I state the name of a former circuit court judge?
Does not have to be a current. Okay.
Well,
Do I have to say his name on camera?
If you're not comfortable answering the question.
Well, he's now deceased,
Okay, understood. I'll respect that.
but he was a criminal court judge and made many decisions that I felt were not fair and were more politically based and based on favoring one side, the prosecution, as opposed to fairness.
Any follow-up questions?
I have a follow-up.
Dan?
Look, I completely respect your dedication to your family, but I also heard some reluctance and some concern about running a circuit-wide campaign.
Yes, sir.
And you may have to start that, if you get appointed in 6 weeks, you've got to start running for that office in 6 weeks and 1 day.
Is it that
It's gonna
soon?
be, I suspect it's gonna be that
That was about
soon, depending upon.
2020,
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
which is around the corner.
That's what I'm saying. So you're gonna have 1 day on the bench and you've got to open your campaign account.
Wow.
Are you ready to do that? And look, there are different philosophies on any commission about whether the ability to run for office, to be elected, to garner community-wide support is a factor in an appointment process. But I want to know how you feel about this because it may be a factor.
I'm completely comfortable running for judge. In honesty, the finances would probably be difficult. I do have a savings account that I could liquidate if I had to. Hopefully, I wouldn't have to.
Well, likely you can get contributions, but I'm also wondering about the time. I'm more interested in the time commitment instead of the financial commitment. Are you ready to run?
Am I ready to run? I would run if I had to. And I would find the time to still put my family first. My son's mother has had some difficulties in life, but she's made strides, and she'd have to step up to the plate. But if she didn't, I'd still be prepared to run.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Appreciate you coming forward today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Very much.